Dear all, it's a great pleasure to say welcome to all of you. We are having 32 participants now, and we are a cooperation of many committees today. My name is Katrin Papst. I'm the chair of ICE Ethics, and it's an honor to be today together with you and many other national and international committees, which you might have seen on the screen while you have waited for us to come on. So today we are going to hear Lauren and Bruno, who will be introduced in a second by my colleague and board member, Valeria Pica, who is going to be the moderator of the session today. And we are going to hear about the fourth round of consultation of Icom Define. And hopefully we are going to listen to 5 proposals for the new museum definition and how we came so far. I would like shortly to read out our partners of today's meetings, because as I said in the introduction sentence, it's a pleasure that ICE Ethics can collaborate with so many other international and national committees. International committees who are our partners today are CAMOC, ICMemo, NATIST, COMCOL, Icom, DRMC, UMAC, Icom Sweden, Icom Costa Rica, Icom Southeast Europe, Icom Slovenia, Icom Dominican Republic, ICEE, and ICCC. So it's great to have so many Icom members here. We have seen already in the chat many different countries and committees in addition to those mentioned. So I think I will stop here and give the floor to Valeria, who will introduce our 2 speakers, and I'm looking very much forward to the talk. Thank you. Valeria, please.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you everyone for being here with us today. It's a really great pleasure to have Lauren and Bruno that now are going to tell us the last outcomes about this pretty important and participatory process that started to get to a new definition of museum. When everybody knows actually that there have been a pretty long phase and different steps to come to a new definition, thanks to the consultations, the qualitative and quantitative analysis that have been done, and also the evaluation of keywords and concepts that have been actually part of these long and complex work that now Lauren and Bruno are going to introduce. When everything started, actually, we were also looking for a new definition of museum in times of change. And probably no one could expect what would have been happened in the few next years. So now we are in a time of a pandemic, we are in a time of wars all around the world. And so probably also this new definition should comprehend and talk about the times that we are living. So what's the role of museums and museum professionals in a time like the one that we are experiencing all together? Just to introduce actually our guest, and I'm very pleased and happy to have them here. For those of you that don't know Bruno and Lauren. Lauren is a doctor in art history with national and international experience. She's a lecturer, researcher, curator, and consultant of art, culture, and museums and heritage. And currently, she's adjunct professor of art history in the School of Plastic Arts at the University of Costa Rica. Lauren also teaches humanities and tourism courses at the National University of Costa Rica. She has many publications on modern and contemporary Costa Rican art, as well as topics on museology. She's a treasurer of Icom Costa Rica and also treasurer of the Icom LAC Regional Alliance. And she is co-chair of the Standing Committee for the Museum definition, Icom define. Bruno is a professor of museology at the Federal University of the State of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. He coordinates the Laboratory of Experimental Museology and work closely with community-based museums. Currently, Bruno is chair of Icom and co-chair of Icom Define. The presentation that Lauren and Bruno are going to start will last about 30 minutes, and then we will have time for a Q&A. So if you have questions, you can both write them in the chat or just raise your hand in the hand of Bruno and Lauren presentation. So it's a really great pleasure to have you both here, and I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Valeria. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much for both of you for organizing this. We're really, really excited about this opportunity to exchange with so many different committees. And we have already seen that there is a huge diversity of committees and geographic representation in the participants of this session. So this really is important to us because for us, this is a collaboratively process. We are here, and I think this is the first thing that we need to say, that we are here representing a very diverse group of 20 professionals who makes Icom Define and who are responsible for the work of Icom Define that we are going to present to you. But we are also representing the results of almost 2 years of very hard consultations. And we know that we have given you a lot of work, but we are also very glad to present these results, knowing that they really reflect the participation of the great majority of committees within Icom. I mean, the participation throughout this process have really exceeded all our expectations from the beginning. And also we have said that before, and I would like to repeat that this is also a historical process for Icom, because in the recent participatory processes and consultations that Icom has opened, this has been the one with the greatest rate of participation from national committees, international committees, affiliated organizations, and regional alliances. So we couldn't be more proud of this, but there is still a lot of work to be done in the next months, and we count on you for this collaboration to continue. So we're here today to present a little bit of what has been done, and especially what means consultation 4, which is the stage where we are at. And it is, I mean, most of you who are chairs or secretaries of committee, you have already received our letter explaining consultation 4 and asking you again to consult on your members and to think about how to respond to us by rating the proposals of definitions that we are presenting to you at this point. So the idea here is to really go through the points and really explain what's going on for those who haven't been following. It's still time, there is still time for you to participate. And for those who have been following very attentively and very actively participating in our process, to really let us know if you have any comments and questions at this point. So here, just summarizing a little bit of the process. First of all, we would like to thanks to all the participation from you guys between this since the beginning in December 2020 up to this point in 2022. I mean, thanks to your very active participation throughout this process, we are arriving at a point where we can show you some proposals that, in our opinion, and based on the data we have received, really reflect a common point in what we can think of as a definition of the museum for the 21st century within the Icom organization. So the definition proposals that you have, some of you might have already seen, and we are going to show them again in this presentation. They are based on the data received, and they are a reflection of the choices that you made, that all the committees made during the various rounds of consultation, following our participatory methodology that as I said before, was presented to you in December 2020. So if your committee has been unable to participate thus far, which we can definitely understand, we know that we have been through very busy years, there is still time for you to take part. And that's why we're here to invite those who haven't participated yet to really engage in this process in consultation 4. So we are doing this together, and a lot of the steps we have to show to you are those we're going to explain it a little bit further now, how we want to do this together and why this is really a collaborative process. Laura, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you once more to Valeria, to IC Ethics, to Catherine, and Bruno for starting us off. So what you're seeing on the right-hand side of your screen is a fact sheet that we put together, and some of you have maybe seen it circulating around, and we're going to actually go through it and try to explain it a little bit in more depth. And we're extremely intent upon receiving any questions you may have or comments that you have at this point. So how is it that we're doing this together? This, as Bruno said, has been a very exciting process, and it's been very exciting to have all the committees responding to the museum definition methodology that we put forth. So far in the process, 116 Icom committees, regional alliances, and affiliated organizations have taken part in the process, either in the second or the third or both of the consultations. And so that's quite exciting because it's people from all over the world, and it's been very active. And we're hoping that even though consultation 4 might be not a very extensive amount of time, that we will continue to get such a high participation. We're now arriving at, we're in consultation 4 already, the opportunity for members through their committees to rank 5 proposals. So how did we get to the 5 proposals that are circulating out there that have been published? So as Valeria mentioned at the beginning, there was a first round of consultation, which was known as consultation 2, where we gathered key terms and concepts. At that point, we then had consultation 3, during which we had committees evaluate those key terms and concepts. So the ones that received highest amount of repetition in consultation 2, we put forth to evaluation, and even those that didn't receive such a high amount of response. And both of these consultations went through an independent and external analysis. Many of you may have received or read the reports. The reports are available online, and we worked very closely with those reports that were prepared. So you see that, currently we're at this red dot here, but how did we get here? So we gathered, how did Icom define, analyze, and work with the data that was received in these previous stages? Once we got the reports, we grouped the Icom define, which is made up of 20 professionals who are of different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, different geographic backgrounds, different origins in general, and different professional experience. And we made groups of 4 people. So there were 5 groups of 4, hence those 5 groups each worked on one definition proposal. During 3-month period of time, we worked on these proposals. Each of the groups worked on their proposal. And we were continuously meeting once again within the Icom defined larger group to go over and analyze the proposals as we moved forward in drafting them. So it wasn't that these groups were working in isolation. They were constantly coming back to Icom define. And during the process, we were continuously taking into consideration the data that was received in the consultations, of course, but also legal aspects. This is important. We have a specific member that was named from LIAC who was giving legal advice and expertise throughout the process. And so we were taking her advice into consideration. And also cultural specificities. This is important because there's certain terms that, for example, we can talk about that curator might mean something in one part of the world and mean something different in another part of the world, or conservator means something in the European context and it means something else in, for example, in Latin America. So we had to always keep in mind terms that had these kind of cultural specific meanings. And then of course, also we took into consideration translation issues. So it's important to point out that the work that was done within the groups was done first in English, because that was the language that we all have in common. But then the work was circulated within other groups that were language groups. So there was an English language group, a Spanish language group, and a French language group that worked on translating the proposals as they were being drafted so that we could define or notice any places or any terms or any phrases that were awkward in other languages, or that didn't in the other official languages, or that didn't translate well into the other official languages. So those were all the considerations that were taken into that were taking place as we went through this 3-month process that basically began in November, finalized around beginning of February, during which we tweaked and tweaked and retweaked these 5 proposals that you will be seeing toward the end of the presentation.
So based on all of that has been done, what's next? Icom defined, based on this consultation, we'll work with the top ranked proposals. So the idea, of course, the most important part of this consultation is the ranking of proposals, which each committee will have the chance to do via the form that has already been sent to you. And then after we have the proposed ranked and we realize which are the top ones according to Icom representatives, we are going to be working on these proposals. As Laurent said, we have already tweeted, we have already worked on the translation with very details, but really we know that the work is not perfect yet. We feel that we still need work to be done even in these 5 proposals, and we count on your feedback to perhaps adjust or especially maybe work on the translation. We know that some things work better in certain contexts, some things don't really work in certain contexts of the words. Of course, we don't know all that, because that's why we need your support, especially the national committees with all the experience, the contextual experience that you have, but also the international committees as representing specific areas of expertise in the museum field. So based on all that we're going to be able to gather in this consultation, we will present the top proposals on May 5th at a preliminary advisory council meeting. So this is very important for you to know, because all the representatives of committees are, of course, members of the advisory council, and that's why we decided, and we worked closely with Regine Schultz, who will be organizing this and who will be chairing this meeting. We're going to have on the 5th of May an entire meeting to discuss the proposals. And that's really a chance, again, to hear from you guys if there are any concerns, if there are still comments, and really, if you want to advocate for one definition, that's the moment where we're really going to want to hear and discuss the top proposals that we expect to be 2 or 3, no more than 3 proposals at this point. Of course, it will depend on the results that we're going to get from this consultation, but we are really expecting to have 2 or 3 proposals at this point. So with these proposals, what's going to happen in this advisory council meeting is a voting process that will take place to arrive at the final selection that will be submitted to the executive board. But how are we going to do it? The idea is really to have a vote, and this time only the representatives, the chairs of committees are going to be able to vote. And each committee will vote on their preferred definition, but we're going to do that in a way to eliminate, to take rounds on voting by eliminating. If we have 3, for example, we first see which one we can eliminate, and then again we'll vote on the 2 top proposals that we have. I mean, that's something we're going to see how it's going to go, but the idea is really to have a possibility of voting on the proposals by eliminating and finding which one is the best proposal that really represent the unity between the different committees. Then after that, after we have the selected proposal, we will present it to the executive board, who will be sending the proposal to the Extraordinary General Assembly in Prague for a final vote on the museum definition. So that's the process so far. We know that it's a little bit tight because the 5th of May is just around the corner, and that's why we need you to be engaged in this consultation right now and really to help us collect your feedback on the proposals. Also, please, if you, go ahead, Lauren.
It's important just to point out that this time we really cannot give extensions.
Exactly,
so
exactly.
10th is the final date, and I think that you can all see we tried to make it as long as possible, this consultation for period of time, but we definitely cannot grant extensions this time around because we have to work on what we receive to prepare for May 5th.
Yeah, so just to have in mind the two important dates, April 10th is to send the responses to consultation 4. We are not going to be able to give another deadline this time because everything's very tight. And May 5th is the time when we are going to meet to discuss the proposal, the top proposals. So please put that in your schedules if you are chairs of committees. Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, so what is the feedback that we're receiving in consultation 4? First of all, some of you may already know this, but committees must rank the 5 proposals. So as we said, there's 5 proposals. They have to be ranked. You put your preferred one and then in order of preference onward. And then we have created 2 text boxes where committees can comment on their top selection. So in this case, they can pretty much comment on what they wish, but ultimately what we're looking for is any suggestion or modification to a word or a phrase, but we're looking primarily for any changes or suggestions that use words or phrases from other proposals. So because these are the terms that have already been evaluated. So at this point, no new terms can be proposed. So for example, let's say your committee says their favorite one is proposal number 4, but they would like to see just a slight change in a certain phrase. And either that can be something that's not a majorly big difference, or if they grab it, they can grab a phrase or a word from another one of the proposals. Like they like a certain phrase from proposal number 1, and they want to stick it into proposal number 4. We also have created the opportunity, again, through a text box, for committees to justify why they put the 5th choice in last place. This is important for us to know as well, because this is where we will get a sense about if there's something that's majorly wrong or that is a big problem for certain committees within these proposals. So it just might turn out to be that one of the proposals gets a lot of support from many committees, but we find out that there's a few committees that have a really big problem with a certain phrase or a certain term. And so with that said, this is the opportunity to find out something that's very problematic in one or another one of the proposals that may be top ranked by other committees. We have also enabled it's also a possibility for those who are committees that work in Spanish or in French, that they can propose an alternative translation within the text boxes. So in case you feel that a committee feels that there could be a better translation, that is something that you can also let us know. And it's very important for us that you also know that we're primarily going to take into consideration recurring comments. So if there's just a comment that comes forth from one committee, it's not likely that it will be taken into consideration. But if we get multiple committees saying the same thing, then we will definitely be taking that into account as we prepare the proposals to be taken to the advisory council. It is possible, for example, that at the advisory council, there will be 2 of these proposals and one of them has a slight variation, because we noticed that several committees said something about one of them, and it's a possibility that what is presented to you guys is that, right? The one with a slight variation. So I know we don't have very much time, but it is important to keep this in mind about the recurring comments. If you work closely with other committees, talk with them, figure out if there's certain things that you have in common to let us know. And in a sense, comment in the same way so that we can really gain a sense of if there's a problem that many people have or a suggestion that many committees have. This, for example, is being done at the level of Icom LAC, that Icom LAC is trying to work together to reach a consensus within the region. So LAC is putting together 2 webinars and is gathering the data to try to get to a consensus so that if in the entire region something is felt by the majority of committees, they can all respond in a similar fashion.
Yeah, so here to reiterate, before we go to the proposals, we would like to reiterate our commitment to you and to Icom. Honestly, this is something that we have been valuing throughout the process, which is basically to be transparent and to be inclusive in all the ways that we can, so that this definition can really represent some sort of unity between our diversities and our different perspectives on the museum world. So Icom Define, since the beginning, has been committed to transparency, and throughout the process, we have continuously informed on member space within the Icom website, as well as other channels. So we have been, everything that has been produced, all the reports, all the results from consultations are available in the member space page and the member space page, and we have a specific page. If you are Icom member, you probably already have seen it. We have a specific page for all the work of Icom Define. But if you're not a member, Icom also has created a page that is open to non-members and to the museum community in general to follow up the work that is being done, because we know very well that the definition, even though this is a definition of Icom, we know that as being Icom, the only global organization for the museum sector, this definition has impact on everybody, Icom members or non-members. So we have a responsibility here to communicate to the broad community very well, and we have been doing that since the beginning. Icom Define is also committed to inclusivity, and we have continuously been reaching out to the many committees, encouraging and facilitating their participation to ensure geographic representation, which is something very important to us in this process. For example, in consultation 3, we are very concerned about those committees who haven't been able to participate in consultation 2. So we have organized specific webinars with certain areas of the world. We have a very interesting webinar, for example, with Francophone countries in Africa, which has been organized by one of our Icom Define members. So we have been contacting people, and we have been in direct connection with your community. Several of us have been dialoguing with you, which really has enriched this process in a way that I think allow us to really see what are the commonalities between our different voices. So I hope we can continue doing that, like Lauren was saying, in this stage of consultation 4. Other than that, Icom Define remains open to hearing from you at all times. You're welcome to reach us. This is our email. You can reach us through the training email of Icom. We have been, Lauren and myself, trying to respond as much as possible to your questions. So is the members of the Secretariat who have been working with us very closely. So we are still available, and we can hear. It has been very helpful to hear from you in the previous consultations. Some of your committees have really contributed in adapting stuff or identifying some errors, because we are humans, and of course that sometimes there are mistakes that we make, and you have been really making this process possible, and we are really thankful to that. We hope we can continue that way. Now the proposals.
All right, so one thing that's very important before, actually I'm gonna go back just for 1 second, because some of you might be excited and haven't read the proposals. One of the things that was very important for us at this time is that the proposals be looked at and read in the 3 languages at the same time, considering that there are many bilingual and trilingual Icom members. So we've really tried to publish the proposals where you can see them. So even if your primary language is one of the official languages, you can also gain a sense of what it's going to look like or sound like in another one of the 3 official languages. And so now on to the proposals themselves. We're going to read them obviously in English during this session, but as we said, that they're available to be read in the 3 languages in the various places where they've been published. So proposal number 1, a museum is an accessible, inclusive, not-for-profit institution. It inspires discovery, emotion, reflection, and critical thinking around tangible and intangible heritage. In the service of society and in active partnership with diverse communities, museums research, collect, conserve, exhibit, educate, and communicate. They operate professionally and ethically, promoting sustainability and equity.
So now proposal number 2, a museum is a permanent, not-for-profit institution accessible to the public and of service to society. It collects, conserves, interprets, and exhibits tangible, intangible, cultural and natural heritage in a professional, ethical, and sustainable manner for research, education, reflection, and enjoyment. It communicates in an inclusive, diversified, and participatory way with communities and the public.
One of the things I just wanted to say before we move forward is you may notice that some of these, for some of you, they may seem quite similar, the 5 proposals that we're presenting, but it shouldn't come as a surprise, considering that they derived from the same data of consultations 2 and 3. And I apologize that we didn't mention this before, but that's important to keep in mind. And at the same time, rather than try to amalgamate them, we decided it was most important to present the 5 of them to you and let you choose.
Especially because they have nuances. I mean, at the same time, they work with the same words, but they have nuances and differences that are really the interpretation of the different groups on these words and how you're using them. So we really wanted to expose this to you and let you inform us how you would like a certain term to be used.
Proposal number 3, a museum is a not-for-profit permanent institution in the service of society that researches, collects, conserves, exhibits, and communicates tangible and intangible heritage. Open to the public, it is accessible, inclusive, and fosters diversity and sustainability. The museum operates professionally, ethically, and with the participation of communities, offering varied audience experiences for the purposes of education, enjoyment, and the expansion of knowledge.
So proposal number 4, the slide hasn't changed. Oh, there you are. So number 4, a museum is an inclusive, not-for-profit institution open to the public, which researches, collects, preserves, exhibits, and communicates tangible and intangible heritage, facilitating critical reflections on memory and identity. Museums are in the service of society, providing educational and knowledge-sharing experiences. Driven by communities or shaped together with their audiences, museums can take a wide range of formats, fostering equal access, sustainability, and diversity.
And the last proposal, a museum is an open and accessible not-for-profit institution that collects, researches, preserves, exhibits, and communicates the tangible and intangible heritage of people and the environment for the benefit of society. Museums are committed to ethical and sustainable practices and are operated in an inclusive and professional manner to create enjoyable and educational experiences that foster curiosity and discovery.
So we are very happy to let you, I mean, for us, it's been really grateful to have this process based on the reactions from all the communities who have participated so far. So we really hope that we can keep working together to arrive at a definition proposal that represents us all in our unity and diversity. And now we would love to hear from you guys, your questions and comments, not just for the Icom representatives, but for all the audience who's here. I see that there are people from different places, from different communities, and that's a really good opportunity for us to really discuss and collaborate in a way that can inform this consultation. Lauren, would you like to say some final words?
Nope, just thank you very much to everybody. And actually, I think that, yes, I do want to say that we're still at the opportunity to detect any major issues that may be around. So we definitely are not at a closed point in the process. We want to hear from you, but at the same time, of course, always taking into consideration the data that has already been collected from everybody. So a single committee can't just say, oh, we need to talk about such and such in the definition. Well, we've already passed that process. But if there's a major problem or major concern or a very simple change that can happen to make people happier with one or another one of the proposals, this is the time to do it. So we tried to create as many opportunities for committees to reach out to us and let us know, and we still have that time available to us. So thank you very much, everybody, for helping us in this process, and we cede the word to you all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Lauren and Bruno, for this very informative presentation that really allowed us also to better focus and better understand actually the process that you experienced to come to this point, to the fourth round of consultations. Just to remind to all of us, actually, the two close deadlines, actually. So April the 10th and May the 5th, as Bruno and Lauren were stressing. That is a really close deadline, but it is really important that all of us keep participating in this process. And obviously the recordings of this presentation will be available. So IC Ethics will provide the recordings to all the other committees that have already has to participate in the organization of this moment. And so everybody could listen again and then so watch again the presentation and enter a little bit more in the in this process. I know that there are many questions arising actually about this topic, but I would like to start, if I can, also asking why are the definition proposals so similar, and at the same time, why are the definition proposal different? You said that they are coming from the data from consultation 2 and 3, but could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Bruno, go ahead if you would like to.
Yeah, okay, we can maybe comment on each other's answer, but I think this is a very important question to us because it really gives us the opportunity to explain a little bit further on how the process has been developing. I mean, as you know, as we presented, we have to work, and our first obligation and responsibility in this process of drafting the proposals was towards the data that we have received from consultations 2 and 3. I mean, we really, of course, we are 20 different professionals in this group. We all have our personal opinions and our different views. Some of us work in natural history museums, some of us work in art museums or historical museums. So we all have our personal opinions of what a museum is. But so how can we compromise our personal views? The answer to that was looking at the data and really seeing what were the commonalities between the different Icom committees. So that's how we arrived at the top words to be used. And that's why, responding to your question, Valeria, some of the definitions are close to each other. Of course, some of them are more different in some ways, but they have real clear similarities because we respected the data. So for example, most of them used the top terms which have received over 50% of frequency in the data. Those terms which were around, I think in the beginning, around 30 terms, and then we saw that some of them were similar, and that's why in some cases we choose one, in some cases we choose other, but we concentrated on those top terms that were there because the majority of Icom committees have said that they should be. So that was our main goal. But of course, and I was saying why they are somehow different in some ways. Of course, we needed to interpret these terms because evidently, one thing is to have a list of key concepts. The other thing is to put them in a sentence. They have to make sense. So we really looked also to the definitions and to the qualitative comments that the committees have provided us through the consultation, but also to our own expertise. And in that way, that's why we really wanted to present the 5 proposals, because they reflect 5 interpretations from our groups in the different areas where they act. So these groups, like Lauren already said, they were formed based on geographic representation and also on the different backgrounds and expertise. And that's why they represent specific views on the museum based on the data and based on the specificities of their members. I don't know, Lauren, you should
I think that seems a satisfactory answer. I do think what's interesting to point out is some of the proposals follow quite kind of follows similarly to our current definition. And in a sense, what is most interesting though to notice is what are the terms that surfaced that are in all of them. So for example, terms like sustainability, terms like inclusivity, terms like accessibility, those were all important new terms, but at the same time, there are other terms that were highly important, that were contentious perhaps in the past, and that committees let us know that this was very important. So I actually see one of the questions in the chat about why the museum is nonprofit. Many of the committees, I'm taking advantage and answer that already. The committees responded that, for example, nonprofit was important, or institution. Institution received a very high response from committees. So we just abided by that, even if, as Bruno said, we had other feelings towards them personally, as personal, representatives of the museum field in our regions or in our professional milieu. It is still, nonetheless, we abided by the data for the most part. So I think that's important to point out.
Okay, so there's a question in the Q&A chat from Giovanna Vitelli, and she asked, a large part of the process of developing museums as equitable and open institutions is to be willing to be open to criticism and scrutiny by potential partners. One senses that is only option 4 that allows for this. The other options appear to leave control in the hands of the institution. Could you please comment?
Yes, certainly. I think that one of the things, most of the proposals mention in somewhere, and I think in this way, yes, proposal number 4 is most likely the most open in that sense, but definitely participation was important and working with communities. So you will notice that most of the proposals also make reference to that, where and when we didn't, there isn't one way to understand the term community. One of the things that was very important as we did this process is understanding the multiple ways in which terms have different meanings in different regions. And we actually felt that that was a strength in our process, where the terms that are what we're using are flexible, right? And so they don't have a pinned down meaning for the most part. Some of them do. I think we can say, for example, institution, even though institution might have slight different nuances, it is clearly a very definitive term, as opposed to, for example, the term space. But when it comes to the notion of how important the community is, I think that comes through in most of the proposals, how a museum has to take into consideration the community, has to the participatory processes that should be taking place in museums, I think are perhaps not extremely, they're not perhaps super emphasized, but they're there, it's there. And ultimately those, whichever proposal comes forth as the preferred one, it's something that museums are going to have to take into consideration if in fact we get a new museum definition, right? So taking into consideration community and taking into consideration participation or participatory processes as something that museums have to think about, which we know in this day and age, still there are many that do, but there's still many that don't. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as we move forward, if there is a new museum definition and if museums will take that call. Bruno, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I think this is, I would just like to comment. I think you explained very well, Laurent, but I just comment. I mean, this is a very critical question, and we welcome this because this refers exactly to some of the debates we had within the group. And I totally understand what you mean, because some of the definitions, even though they mention community, the control in how it's phrased, it's still in the hands of the professionals. And this is also, not all of us agree with this perception. And that's why we have an option that doesn't really present itself that way. But this is also a reflection of what Icom is. And I think we cannot forget that we are in a professional organization. That's something that has been coming up on the group in very different occasions, because we are an organization for museum professionals. I do think, and those who knows me and who knows my work, I obviously, and I think Laurent shares that, because we do work with community museums, and we do know and we recognize that there is a problem of control and of sharing control that needs to be addressed in our field. But that said, in terms of a definition, it's up to, this is the moment where these discussions should be happening, but we cannot make this decision by ourselves. We are representing an organization of professionals. But in order for this organization to open up to different kinds of museums and to museums that are more inclusive to communities, we do need to have a feedback from the members of this organization. We are the ones who have to make this choice and who have to make this change if we want it to happen. It's not an easy change because, as I said, it is a professional organization. But this is the time that we can choose to do it.
Yeah. Thanks so much. So we have a question from Susan, and she says, I'm interested in the discussion around how the definition of museum came to be unlinked from physical buildings. Does this definition have legal consequences in some countries? For instance, implication for fundings?
I hope you can hear me at this point.
Yeah.
You can hear me? Okay, turn off my camera. But I think that's, in a sense, this is what we're looking to hear from you all, right? This is the point in which, if there is a big problem, for example, Susan, if this is something that's noticed as a difficulty, we need to hear about this. It never surfaced as an issue, for example, that there wasn't. Again, it's one of these things of how people interpret the term institution. Some people interpret that as a very physical term, others as a legal term. And again, it's the flexibility that we appreciate in the use of these terms. But we did notice that people did want the term institution rather than space, for example. So I think, I don't know, Bruno, if you wanted to add anything in relation to that.
No, really, I mean, this is really also an important question, because we have had to deal with the issue of institution, but I don't think, based on how the term is being used, even though it was the term that we had to use because most of the communities have chosen institution, but I don't think the way it's put and the way the definitions are presented, that they are necessarily stick to one single kind of museums. And that's something that we have been very concerned of, some of us, to open the definition. So of course, this is, again, there are nuances, and some of the definitions are more, some of the proposals are more open, some of them are more closed and more strict connected to the one that we have currently. But this is an opportunity, again, for you to inform us which kind of openness and how open a definition can be. I mean, honestly, we have different opinions in our community. We don't have the answers to that in terms of how Icom can perceive a definition, and specifically their legal aspects. What are going to be the implications if we have a much more open definition, and especially in terms of funding. We know that there are problems with that in different countries, where the definition goes to public policy and to the distribution of funding for the museum field. And this is something that has surfaced in our discussions. But as I said, not everything we have answers, because not all the problems were presented in our previous consultations. So that's why we have another consultation now.
Thanks. So now a question from Nana Meparisvili from the Committee for Architecture and Museum Techniques. And in ICMTA, we already have started survey and already filled and sent back. And there is a comment written and underlined that the notion permanent definitely should be in the new definition.
That is interesting, because it's a term that I think it's only in, is it in only one proposal? Now I'm not recalling. I know it's in proposal number 3.
I think it's in 2 or 3. It's also in
2 of them.
two.
It's also number 2. So it's a number 2 and number 3. Thank you, Joanna.
Yeah.
This is a term that is very highly contentious. It seems that permanent, we could go back right now to the data. I can probably, I'll look it up quickly now in a moment, but
I think it's 47%. It's in the middle. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's 47%.
Is to see that permanence is something that's highly regarded at the European level, but it's not in other parts of the world. And it's actually quite problematic for other committees. So for example, eco museums or community museums, it's a problematic term because they don't work with this notion of permanence. It doesn't mean that museums, by not saying that a museum is permanent, or by not necessarily including it, doesn't mean that it shouldn't aspire to permanence. But for many people, permanence is a difficult term, especially in the moment that we're living in the world, right? And all the crises around us. It seems for some committees quite a term that needs to be deleted altogether, that just doesn't need to appear. Whereas other committees think that it's a term that must definitely be there. So what's I think within this, in a sense, the strategy of the consultation for process is the fact that it appears in at least 1 or 2 or 3, the terms appear in some of the other proposals, such that you can say, for example, as you mentioned, Joanna, that you might say you like the most option number 4, proposal number 4, but you need the term permanent in there, for example. And so we wanted to make sure that some of the terms were, that a lot of these very important terms for some committees were available in one or another one of the proposals, and allow you guys to let us know how important it is for you. So for example, if you choose number 1, you can say number 1, it's great, we love it, except it needs the term permanent, for example, or to delete a term. So for example, we love number 3 is perfect, except that permanent is a big problem. And for example, I know coming from the Icom Costa Rica point of view, that's an issue for museums here to use the term permanent. So I believe that we've received already some comments about wanting to delete the term permanent. Same thing, for example, with terms like professional, or there's some terms that are a bit contentious, and we're just going to have to see what happens with the results as we move forward. But definitely do not forget to let us know in the comment box of terms that you feel are necessary to either include or delete. And then what's going to happen is that we're going to see an overall of what people feel about that, right? So we can't respond to it. For example, there was another comment about nonprofit. Same thing. It's one of those terms that for some people is highly contentious, once more, because there's profit-making institutions, for example, or the structure, the organizational structure might be based on profit-making institution. Or for example, what happens in the level of community museums, where the organizers at the end of the day, for example, if they sell their art or their wares by those people who are organizing and create the community museum, at the end of the day, they're profiting from the sale of their art that's sold, or their artesanía, their handicrafts that are sold within the community museum. So these are terms that are problematic for some of us, or for other ones of us. And we just have to see what the general consensus, where are we united, as Bruno said earlier, what unites us and what what doesn't, what is going to be a super problematic term to not have, what's a term that we can, in a sense, get rid of without losing important notions of what museums need to do. For example, permanent, once more, museums we expect are going to custody forever, but what is forever? But we'll be custodying collections, and the idea is that it's the permanent endeavor. But once more, we have to see what the majority say on these terms.
Okay, well, this the matter of the Europe-centered, the perspective of museum definition is definitely one of the main issues that you are facing, I guess. And from the Q&A chat, there's a question from Cornelis from IC Memo. And in reference to Bruno's comments, could you indicate whether and what are the different, if any, legal consequences of the 5 options?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I was referring to the fact that we had a lot of discussions on specific terms, but also in the broad structure, of the definition. And I can say, for example, the term not-for-profit was really discussed because initially it was non-profit, and non-profit appeared in the data. Non-profit, I think it's the term that is used in the current definition, but then there was a legal issue because, for example, in the United States, non-profit refers to a very specific kind of legal entity, which is not necessarily what all museums are. So there was this kind of suggestion from the LIAC group, which were very helpful. So we all adopted not-for-profit in English instead of non-profit. But also, for example, there was a discussion because some of the definitions, and as you noticed, as you might have already noticed in the data from consultation 3, some of the definitions have new values like sustainability, like the word community, and like we already had valued before. I mean, it's naive to say that the definitions shouldn't have social values because our current definition already say that museums are at the service of society and its development. It's a value. It's not. This is not measurable in a legal term, but it's there. So we wanted to incorporate this value, but without losing the legal aspect of a definition and how it can be used in legislation. We wanted a useful definition. That's the most important thing here. So one of the things that we decided to do in most of the proposals, I think in all of the proposals, is to have the first sentence as a more applicable sentence for legislation. And the first sentence, as you can see, are in the singular form, even in the case of proposals who have more broad senses and has say museums are after the second sentence. But the first sentence, according to our advices on LIAC, needed to be in the singular form. It needed to be applicable to legislation. And that's why we have in all the cases one more objective first sentence, and the rest of the definition is where we incorporate these values that also appeared very strongly, I might add, in the data that we received. So those were things that we considered, and we are still considering. It's important to say that if there is any other legal aspect that you have perceived that you would like to comment on, it's possible for us to consider at this stage. But I will also like to say that even though we're very concerned with the legal aspect, we have to know that the definition is usually adaptable. Not many countries, even the countries, and I can say for my country, for example, in Brazil, we have the Icom definition in our legislation. I know that many others also do it, but in Brazil, we have adapted it a little bit. It's not, if there are needed to change a specific term or to change how the phrase is put in the legislation, countries do that. So it's not going to be a problem if they don't completely agree with what's said that. So that's why we wanted to make sure that there was a usable sentence, something that could go to legislation, but also that some values that represent our organization were possible to be used and to inspire public policies and legislations as much as it can. So that's that. I hope I could answer to your question.
And there's another question about voting. So what is the eventual process for resolving situations that are not resolvable? Situations where Region 1 must have term in all proposals and Region 2 cannot have that term anywhere. Not just that they don't like it. Is it a vote of the majority in the end?
Very good question. And one that I think that it depends, first of all, on what the responses are that we're going to be receiving now. And I think as Bruno said, to a certain extent in certain regions, if it was necessary to, or a certain country, for example, if it was necessary to include a certain term or delete a certain term, they can do so within their own specific national context. When it comes to region, I think it is going to end up being an issue of majority, because it isn't just 2 regions in the world. We have about, I think there's, is it 7 regional alliances? So if we kind of, and I only cite those 7 as a means of understanding kind of like how Icom has divided up the world within this sense. And I think that if one region has a major problem, but none of the others do, then it's a matter of taking into consideration that majority that's in the world, in the overall worldview of what a museum should be. So I don't know, Bruno, if you would like to add something to that.
Yeah, I think I would just say that even though, I mean, we have discussed this a little bit about the voting, but I think if you look back to the process and how we have conducted it, something that is very important is that even though we're working with the majority, and of course we have to respect the democratic process, if people vote for a term, and a term is very important for the Icom community in general, we have to respect that, but we have also been very sensitive to the regional representation of terms in the definition. We know that Icom is obviously Eurocentric in the sense that we have a greater number of national committees in Europe. That's a mathematical fact. And we have to look, because of that, we have to look at the data in a critical way. And we have been doing that. So I just complementing what Laurent said, we are working with the majority, and we are working, of course, with the expression that you present to us. If several committees are presenting something, we will hear, we will consider it. But at the same time, if a whole region decides to present that, to say that some term is problematic, we will definitely consider, even if this region is not Europe, even if it's not the most representative region in Icom. So that's how we are considering the geographical distribution of terms and how this definition should represent us all and not just one specific region.
Yeah, I know that Catherine has a question about voting as well. So please, would you like to?
Thank you very much. First, I have to say thank you for this great presentation. It's very interesting to follow this process. It's very professional, done from the outside, very impressive. I have a question. You said regional representation, Bruno, and my question would be the size of the committee, meaning that there are national committees, but this is a region again, but let's say international committees. Some are very small. ICE Ethics, it's quite a new committee. It's not very big. Then we have big committees with many, many members. And in the end, it's the chair who votes, and it's each committee is going to arrange the proposals. So my question would be, how are you going to see that one committee is small and maybe there are only 20 members or 40 members having an opinion? In other committees, it might be 400 members having an opinion in international committees. Is this somehow presented, or does every committee? Do you know how many members have been involved in the process, or is it just the share and all committees, regardless of size, have the same possibilities to vote for the ranging of the proposals? Thank you.
Yeah, another good question, because it gives us the chance to say that we had this discussion in the beginning, and this was something that was a concern for some of us in Icom Define. But we decided, and that was since the moment we established the methodology, we decided that we needed to obey to the Icom representational system, how Icom votes. And it's not perfect, but each committee, each international or national committee have 5 votes, no matter if they have 4,000 members or if they have 40 members, they have the same amount of votes. And this is somehow we know that it could be problematic in terms of representation, but we also understand that this is how Icom is not driven by only a few committees. Because if we pay attention to the numbers in terms of national committees, again, most of the big committees, for several reasons, are in Europe. And if we consider that, for example, we have Icom Germany and Icom France, they are the biggest committees of Icom. And we have several committees in Latin America and in Africa that don't have so many members because, of course, for different reasons, either they are financial, either they are political, but they have fewer members. They still represent a whole country. And so we needed to obey to Icom representative rules and how, in the end, the vote is going to be organized in the extraordinary assembly. This was not up to us because this is how Icom works. So we just wanted to do something that was representative of all these committees, and we did not get into the matter of how many members they have. I don't know, Laurent, if you would like to to say something else in this sense.
I think you answered quite well, and that yes, it was ultimately based on the structure of Icom, how Icom works. And within the advisory council, each committee only has one vote, the chair. Now we're hoping, and the intent, and we've always reminded committees that they should be consulting with their members. And therefore it's not that the chair is going and choosing based on their own personal preference, but rather it should be based on consultation with their membership. So, but once more, these are one of those things that's very difficult for us to be able to control in any way, right? We can't be monitoring everybody. And also at certain points in time, we thought it would be important to gain a sense of how many people were participating per committee and so on. But that's ultimately, at the end of the day, that's not how Icom works. And so for the sake of aligning with the decisions that were made throughout the existence of Icom, this is the way that Icom Define has decided to go with this. And
Yeah.
I think that's great. It's very fair. So just said, I just wanted to sum it to get your opinion. Valeria, sorry, please.
No, you're welcome. So we have a triple question from Abdurrahim from Icom India. So why the museum is non-profitable? If any museum made for profit, how it can be out of the museum? So the term non-profit must be deleted from the museum definition. And that's the first of the three questions or suggestion. Then the definition proposed by non-museologists should be considered because they are unaware about the functions of museum and the subject matter. And then lastly, the definition must be very precise and avoid unnecessary terms like tangible and intangible heritage, because both come under heritage. Simply conservation of heritage is sufficient.
I'm sure we'll both answer this, but I'll go ahead. First of all, the issue of nonprofit, I think we've addressed that already in terms of it's going to be one of these terms that's going to end up being a majority, likely a majority perspective on that matter. But then just to assuage any fears that you may have about how these definitions were drafted. Everybody is a museum professional who has worked on this process. So for the committees submit, they're all Icom members and therefore museum professionals. And then the 20 members of Icom Define are all museum professionals. I'm not going to say specifically museologists because they're not all museologists, but they're museum professionals, many of whom have decades of experience or who have a very wide range of a wide set of experiences. So I don't think all of them have been drafted by museum professionals or people who dedicate themselves to museums, to studying museums, to working in museums, to advising museums. So in relation to that, I think that's important to point out. And then lastly, the issue about tangible and intangible heritage. This is something that was specifically, we found out when in the data, people want to maintain tangible and intangible heritage. There were those of us who, for example, in 2019, it was that separation between tangible and intangible, or description of having the inclusion of the two terms to describe heritage was eliminated in 2019, and that was problematic. And that came forth once it was problematic in 2019, and it was it came forth in the data that was received that it's necessary. People still want and need it. So I think that these are the kinds of things that, Abdurrahim, I understand the perspective perhaps from your national committee that it's not necessary. I think others might feel as well that it's not necessary, but there there's a majority that seems to feel that it's still necessary to specify tangible and intangible heritage. Bruno, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Well, I think you gave perfect answers, Laura. I just think that sometimes when you think about these terms, it's necessary to go back to the history of the Icom definition. And very briefly, I mean, the non-for-profit part of the definition has proven to be important for Icom in general. And it doesn't refer to the fact that museums cannot have profits, but that they shouldn't be oriented to that. And it shouldn't be their main goal. So I think over the years, I mean, I'm not saying I agree with the term as well, but I understand why it is in the data, because it's important for people that museums are not reduced to capitalist companies and everything that has a capitalist purpose can be a museum. So it's also a value of Icom. It's not just, it's a legal term, but it's also a very important value for the Icom organization as it is today. And the same goes for tangible and intangible. Of course, for some of us, when we say heritage or cultural heritage, you're definitely encompassing all the forms of culture. But it's important to remember that in 2007, when the definition was amended, the intangible term was included. It was a very important step towards the inclusion of other forms of heritage and museums, especially community museums that don't necessarily have material culture in their collections or material collections. So I think it was an important step for Icom, and it was in the moment where UNESCO was discussing this issue of intangible cultural heritage as well. So I think it shows where we are in terms of understanding heritage and museums. And I think it's still important based on the data. Those terms are still important for Icom members. Of course, Icom India is definitely welcome to send suggestions and to say this term doesn't work here. We'll be happy to consider it. But at this point, we have to work with the feedback that we already have.
Yes, and as Susan was also stressing in her comment, the inclusion of both tangible and intangible is vital given our present circumstances and the destruction of cultures through wars. I would like to move to another topic, if you agree, and just to ask how the results from consultation 4 will take to the next steps, and then how the methodology how you will approach actually the methodology after consultation 4 to get to the final proposal.
Yeah, as we mentioned before, it definitely is going to require that the comments are recurring for us to take them into consideration. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be like the majority where 60 committees came forth and said you had to delete the term not-for-profit, or you have to delete the term permanent, for example. We will consider them without it being a majority, and it will be taken to Icom Define, the group as a whole, to work, to consider it, to consider them, to, on the one hand, make sure that all the comments received align with the data. As we mentioned in the beginning, they will, if it doesn't align with the data. So for example, if a country comes forth, and even if a whole region comes forth, for example, Latin America, where decolonization is such an important concept. If all of Latin America comes forth and says, you have to include decolonization in the definition, in that case, let's say it's 13 of the 19 national committees in that region, we're not going to include it because it didn't pass in the consultation 2 and 3, right? It was a term that was proposed. It appeared, so it was proposed in consultation 2, and it passed through evaluation process of consultation 3, and it didn't get a high rate, So that term, even if 12 committees say it, it's not going to be taken into consideration. But I think that if there's other terms that are pointed out and perhaps comments that are made, we have to synthesize the comments that we're going to be receiving, and synthesize them in such a way that, because they might not come across in the exact same manner, right? That it might not be as simple as saying like delete permanent, and like we might not get 20 committees saying delete permanent, or keep permanent or include permanent. You know, we have to see overall how many comments we receive on specific terms. So this is going to be work done very quickly at the Icom define level, and definitely comparing it to the data received. Bruno, do you want to add anything?
No, that's it. I mean, we will definitely have to see how this consultation goes. We will consider everything, but in a way that as Lauren was saying, we are not going to be contradicting the data from previous consultations. And that's why we're asking for people to comment on the terms that are already there. So if you want to take something from one definition, from one proposal and put into the other, that's something we can consider. But to propose something completely new at this point, we cannot consider because of how these terms have already been evaluated by everyone.
Thank you so much. I do not see more questions in the Q&A or in the chat. We have a few more minutes, actually, if anybody would like to ask or to go in depth to some of the topics that Lauren and Bruno have presented for the new Icom definition.
I saw some comments on. Yeah, no, I was just going to add because I saw some comments on the matter of translation of the webinar, and I would like to call attention to the fact that, as in the previous stages, we always try to make webinars, to participate in webinars in the 3 languages of Icom. So this is in English, but we are going to have a similar webinar this week actually on Wednesday, Laura can confirm, organized by Icom LAC in Spanish, and then we are already planning with Icom France another webinar in French. So we try to do as much as we can in these 3 languages. So this was the English moment for English speakers, but if you would like to hear us presenting this again in a different language, unfortunately we cannot do Arab, but we can try to maybe, if either of your national committees would like to do something with simultaneous translation, we would be happy to do that, but neither of us speak Arab. So, but we're doing as much as possible.
Yeah, but it's important to point out that Icom Arab as a regional alliance, at this point, I don't remember if it was consultation 2 or consultation 3. I think it was consultation 3 organized a session that was held in Arabic, and we have Icom defined members who were participating in that session who led the session in Arabic. So if it's felt of necessity, we definitely would be very happy for you to reach out, for example, to either your own national committee, if you want to put it together in Arabic, and we can put you in touch. You know, you can reach out to us at training and put you in touch with our Arab speaking members. We have a webinar on the 26th March in Icom Arab. Okay, perfect. Oh, yeah, right. Wonderful. So there will be a session held in Arabic on the 26th of March. So this is very good news. Hi.
That's why we have such an international committee, because Yarab is also a member of Icom Define.
Okay, so actually there are more comments about coming webinars or meetings also with students actually to discuss the proposal. This is a very good news actually, to have as large as possible community discussing about that. And there's another comment from Richard Hicks and from Africa, and the term equitable covers the notion of decoloniality while including regions for which it is not a key concern, more than equality does.
Yeah, equitable and equal are not the same word. That's well understood, I'd say, by the majority of members of Icom Define. And with that said, though, I'm not right off the top of my head right now. I'm not sure how often the term was used within the proposals, but I think that for many of us, the notion was addressed within the term acceptable. right? So making sure that something is accessible is addressing that there be equity, right, within members, that within a population or a society, that there should be equal access to the museum, no matter what. So I think that that's important to keep in mind. So I appreciate the comment, Richard, and I think it's definitely been addressed within the conversations of Icom Define, and yet it is still one of those terms that there are still people who can't or don't decipher a difference between them. And so I think this is something that I think it's really important to understand that this is a process that we're going through, and that perhaps the definition that comes forth and that it is submitted to a vote within the Extraordinary General Assembly may not satisfy everybody 100%. But it seems that we're calibrating, or we're getting a sense of where committees are at. I think that it's kind of like we're coming to a medium point, a middle ground between those who have perhaps a much more progressive view of museums and those who may have a more conservative view of museums. And I'm sorry to create that kind of dichotomy or polarity. I don't intend to do that. But what I think has been fascinating about this process is watching this kind of middle of the way definition come forth that that will hopefully be of service, will be useful for museums all over the world, right? So I think that again, it's a process. I have no doubt that within 15, 20 years, perhaps, maybe less, maybe more, we will be going through this process again. We will be considering a new museum definition proposal. This is not necessarily the definition that we feel is going to be for life, but rather it reflects where we are within, as we like to talk about it, within our unity and within our diversity, right? We are very diverse. The world is majorly different. Conceptions of what culture is, what nature are completely different all over the place. And so with that said, I think we need to be open to the fact that we're a global organization, where there's needs that are different in different areas, and needs that are different between the generations, right? So Bruno, I don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that said, it's very important that this kind of comments can reach us through consultation form. I think because in some ways, and we have to be very honest here, because you can see the results in the report, some of the terms that are very similar, they were rated as if they were the same, like equality and equal access or equitable. Those were terms that were for a moment put in the same box, because we needed to see if they were really important or not. And now it's the time for precision. And so the kind of discussion you're raising, I think it's very important, because it allows us to make choices in a more precise way. So please make sure to send this to your committees, or to send it to us through, if you are chairs and if your committee has a very specific view on a term that is not being well used, or that could be used in a different manner. This is the time where we can amend the use of a certain term. So if you have this kind of comments, they are actually really helpful for the next stage moving forward. So that's why it's very important. And I take this opportunity to really emphasize how important it is for you, if you are a member or if you are a member of a board, to really make this discussion within your committees and push the chairs. I'm also a chair of a committee, and I know that it's important for the chairs to be pushed sometimes to do something in the name of the committee and to really represent something that is going on inside. So that's the moment. Go ahead and do it.
Yes. And Richard actually was emphasizing this point, just writing, access to a museum does not cover the obligation of colonial countries to consider issues such as repatriation, whereas equitability does. And we have another question in the Q&A from Icom Bangladesh. asking or saying basically non-profitable is perfect as museum definition. In profitable sense, science museum trying to make profit by giving more priority in entertainment than basic science is a comment.
Yeah, that's one of the examples why the word is there.
Yeah. And so Ophelia in the chat says, I want to say thank you once again for your endless efforts in achieving a truly participatory process and make one suggestion. There is an ongoing sender and commentary about the similarity in the future proposal. You have ably addressed two reasons why. Perhaps it would be beneficial if the next email addresses this question and present the reasons why.
Sure, we will make an effort in the, actually I think the reminder email has gone out, but it definitely, we made sure that there be at least a statement regarding the similarity. Perhaps it wasn't clear enough that the similarity is because it's based on the data. And so the next email will be going out in the forthcoming days. So we will try to see if we have time to ensure that that comes across clearly. But either way, we hope that you guys are all talking to each other as well, right? And so kind of spreading the word amongst yourselves about this. And I don't know, Bruno, if you want to add anything else.
I don't know, I wasn't sure by this comment, I wasn't sure if she was referring to the similarity with the current definition, but I don't know, if this was the case, I think this is also an important reminder that, I mean, we know that change is never easy, and in a way, looking at the data, and when we looked at the data since the beginning, we all in the committee have different feelings, but we thought that in a way, even though the new definition or the proposals, as you can see now, they still carry some of the important words and specifically the functions of museums as in the current definition. We do believe that what is changing now is the purpose. It's how do we put museums in the service of society, how we really do that, and what are the values behind the purpose? How can we use this museum as a device to create social change? And I think that's somehow present in all the proposals, because even though you have terms that are already there, we have new values. And I personally believe that these values represent some change in the current century and some change within the Icom organization. And we also have to think that I know that that's something that has been discussed before since 2019, but Icom has changed since the 70s when the current proposal was first approved. Icom was a really small organization. Now we are an organization with around 50,000 members spread all around the world. So we cannot have the same definition for obvious reasons. And so the question that our committee was in charge of answering was, what has changed? And I think these different consultations have really informed us that even though the museum stay the same in a certain way in its traditional functions, but it's put to the service of society in a different way. And that's what has changed. At least it's what the definition, the proposals are informing us at this point.
Yes, that's a very good point. And I guess we just arrived at the end of our meeting room and then of these presentation. I really thank Lauren and Bruno, first of all, for the work you have been doing for so long. It's a really terrific work that is still ongoing. I just remind everyone the deadlines that we are all asked to remember for the next step of and the next consultation. So the deadline of April the 10th for consultation 4, and then May the 5th for the discussion of proposals. And I really look forward to seeing you and to meeting you, and then to read the final proposals in hoping that we can all meet in Prague next summer, in next August. So just the word and the floor to you both, and to Catherine, to greeting all the participants at this meeting.
I think it's important just for us to point out once more how Bruno and I might be co-chairing this committee, but the members of Icom Define have been extremely dedicated to the process and crucial, absolutely crucial, because I think that the process has been informed by a variety of different viewpoints, and those viewpoints are informed by professional experience, by generational experience, by geographic experience, by cultural experience. And so I think it was hard to say the least, but definitely it was extremely rich, and that is because of the wonderful members of Icom Define that really, especially in the last few months, came forth and worked really hard, because we were not easy taskmasters. We were very insistent on our constant meetings. I mean, we have monthly meetings, and in the last 3 months we had like almost weekly meetings between either subgroups or larger groups. So we thank everybody for acknowledging Bruno and myself, but definitely it's absolutely essential. And we hope that once we're all in Prague, everybody can, see the full group of us that have worked so hard on getting to this point.
Danielle is asking for the names. I mean, there are 20 members, so I don't think we have the time to name all of them, but they are on the website. I mean, we made sure to put everybody's names there in the report and everywhere we can, because really this is an active group. It has become, in some moments, it has become our full-time job, which has been very difficult because we also have other jobs. But and we are really proud, because these results really, they reflect a hard work, and we know they are not perfect. We know we still have work ahead, but they really reflect the hard work of this group, and we need to appreciate them.
Yeah, so check out the names if you want to check out everybody's name. Maybe next time we'll include, or the advisory council meeting will include a slide that has everybody's name on it. Definitely. So thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, everybody who has participating in the chat, and all the committees organizing this session. Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you very much to you, Bruno and Lauren, and thanks, Valeria, and to our collaboration partners. As I said in the beginning, there were many collaboration committees collaborating around this event, and it was really perfect. Thank you so much. The recording will be made available for all collaborating committees, and also all other committees who would like to share it. So I think in a couple of days it should be ready. And thanks again, Lauren and Bruno, for this brilliant presentation, and of course, all your committee members. So I'm very much looking forward to finally decide on the definition. Okay?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stay further.
Bye.
Bye.